Hello and welcome to episode 208 of the Crate and Crowbar. This is the 27th of September. I'm Tom Francis and with me here is...
Philip War.
And no one else. Because Chris is away in Italy, right?
Yeah. Milano.
And Tom Senior had a work emergency and so it's just us.
And we don't know anyone else.
And we also haven't played that much, so it might be a semi-short one depending on how many questions we got.
It's fine.
But I got some news.
What's your news, Tom?
My news is that Heat Signature came out. Released it after 3.5 years. It's actually nearly 4 years since I started it. Started December 2013. But I did take a few months off doing other things in that time, so it's about 3.5 years of actual work time.
I'm just upset that I won't be able to ask you how much time do you think is left and you won't nowadays say about 6 months.
Yeah. It's funny how that works. It was 6 months from the start of the project until about 12 months from the end of the project. That's when I stopped saying 6 months and started thinking it was less. And I was always wrong. I was wrong right up until I announced the release date, which is kind of, that's why I announced the release date then, is because I know every other time I'll be wrong. I only announce release dates when the game is already ready, basically. If I could release the build I have, that's the only time I actually know what I'm talking about. But yeah, you see it going down and you're still wrong every time. So you're like, I think it's about 2 months now. And then 2 months later, it's like, well, I still think it's about 2 months, but I don't think it's 6 months. So I'm getting closer, right? And then
We're operating in this variable probability space.
And when it feels like it's 2 weeks away, it's about 6 weeks away. But that's much less than, if you said 2 months at that point, you'd actually be overestimating. So yeah, it did eventually come out. It's actually really one of the many good things about it. But one of them is that when you're working on a project that's taken much longer than expected, you're in good company. Loads of other people are doing that. And you always know there's a distinction between like the heat signatures, which take 3.5 years, and the Owlboys, which take 8 years. And it's always like, I'm not one of the 8-year ones, am I? Like Owlboy, by all accounts, was amazing when it did come out, and sounds like it was worth all the work. But even so, I would not trade places with them. There's nothing I would be happy to spend 8 years on. If I could make a perfect version of Half-Life 3, and it took 8 years, I wouldn't do it. Sorry, guys.
Wow.
I couldn't, so that's one consolation. So it's nice to finally graduate from the maybe this will never come out club to the it did come out, it just took a really long time club.
Do you get a badge? Does the indie community
No, I was thinking about starting like a support group though before it came out. Like it's gonna take any longer. Me and Steve Swink were talking about this. He's been working on Scale for definitely longer than 3.5 years. I can't remember exactly how long.
Oh gosh, yeah. I've written about that a few times, I think.
Yeah. And I think it'd be interesting to talk to all these guys and sort of file them under people who have been constantly working on it all that time and people who've I think the reason Owlboy took 7 years was that they just couldn't work on it for a long time because they had to do contract work to support themselves, which case makes perfect sense. But yeah, I don't know for sure, but I think Spy Party's been 7 years, and I think that's been pretty much full time for Chris. And The Witness was 7 years, and that was certainly, I'm pretty sure full time for Jonathan Blow, and I think a few core staff, and then got bigger. But yeah, it's the launch itself. I started a sort of running joke. Did I start it or did other people start it? Oh, other people kind of started it, but I played into it and I regret it now. Where I was saying Heat Signature's out tomorrow. I wanted to make sure sometimes a game announces its release date and the date itself means nothing to me, and then the date itself just kind of comes and goes without me noticing. There'll be one tweet about its launch or whatever, and if I miss that, then I just literally don't know the game is out. And I wanted to make extra sure that could not happen. If you follow me at all, you're going to fucking hear about this game. And so, I announced the release date when it was only slightly more than a week away, so I could say it's Thursday next week. So there's no confusion about what time frame we're talking about here. It's not months away, it's next week. And then every day I was I didn't make a tweet about it every day, but I would change my name every day to how many days it's going to be out in. And then I was reminding people the day before, oh, it's 24 hours left. And then people would reply say, why don't you just press the button now? Wouldn't it be easy to press the button now? And so many people were saying that, but it became kind of funny to me. So I posted a screenshot of everyone saying that, particularly on the morning of the launch day. And then actually they started saying it so much that it was actually getting quite stressful. It was like, look, guys, no one wants this out more than me. Please just leave me alone while I sort this out. And then our artist John Roberts did a fantastic gif of me spinning on my chair and threatening to press the big green button. All that joking aside, I was actually planning on launching it a bit early. I was going to launch it like 15 minutes early because I wanted to. I couldn't see the purchase options. There's a special edition, and you just can't see that in the preview version of the store. So I wanted to make sure that displayed okay. I was actually even going to do a test purchase. I was going to sort of buy the game on a different account and check that worked. And also, I wanted to make the trailer live because we had a launch trailer that I was insistent this goes up when the game is out. It does not go up before because I'm sick of watching launch trailers that are like, it says like Shadow of Mordor launch trailer, and you watch it and think great, and then like you can't buy it, it's not out. Launch is like 2 weeks away. Like, how is that a launch trailer?
Yeah.
Anyway, and it just seems like good business sense as well to be able to say in your trailer, it's out now, buy it now. You can just do that. Because that's the moment you've sold them on it, hopefully. So I was very insistent it doesn't go up until the game is out, but I did absolutely want it there for moment one because it's really, I'm really proud of it. I think it's a really good trailer. We've got the voice of, Alex Ashby, who does the Something True podcast. And I love that podcast, and his voice is perfect for Heat Signature. Put loads of work in that trailer. It was hell to make. And so I really wanted it up for launch, and, so that was one of the things I was going to do early. I was actually I was starting to worry about 15 minutes early because everyone was asking me to release it early. I knew some people were actually checking, and I actually didn't want it to be like, the thing I didn't want to happen is someone to realize it was out early, and then they do a tweet and everyone retweets that because it's the first news that it's out, and then my own tweet doesn't go as far, and that's the one that's going to have that's the kind of tweet you draft like more than a week in advance. I know exactly what this tweet is going to say and how many links it has in it and whether it's a GIF or a video and all this stuff. So I left it a little bit later, like sort of 7 minutes before launch, and the first thing I did was try and make the trailer live, and it just didn't work. The trailer just did not appear on the Steam page. And I thought, I knew sometimes it takes like a couple of minutes, but then there's a special option to like flush the cache and stuff, and I did all that, still didn't appear. It'd been like 5 minutes, and like, this is not working. I have to do something to fix this. And my theory was it wasn't like the change I'd made, all it was doing was checking a box, an extra trailer that was already there. I didn't wait that late to upload it. I already had it ready to go, and I just was telling it to be public. And I thought maybe the system can't recognize that as a change, so it hasn't really republished. So we need to make another change to get it to recognize as a change. And the change I made was to like, move the trailers around, like change the order of them, and then also make one of them not public anymore, and also simultaneously upload a new version of the trailer in case that's the problem. And then right after I did that, the guys in our Heat Signature Discord said, oh, it's live for me now. So the first change I made had just taken effect, and now I've made all these other changes that are now, A, they're going to fuck up the page, and B, they're going to fuck up the page in like 6 minutes time when, and I can't stop it in the meantime. So I just spent 100% of the time stressing about that, and then I was about like 7 minutes late launching the game. So it all horribly backfired. But the launch itself went great, and it's been 6 days now, and incredibly it's actually sold better than Gunpoint, slightly better, which is way beyond expectations. I was like, I'd made my peace with the fact it couldn't come anywhere close to Gunpoint because it's just a totally different market now, and the sort of what's the word? I want to say received wisdom, is that there are just so many games out there, it's impossible for anything to get attention, and it was pretty pessimistic about its chances. But it did really well, and I don't know why. I wish I could share some useful advice, but it's not because it's good. Sounds like a self-critical thing to say.
That's depressing.
But, I think it is good. I really like the game, but the graph would not make sense for that because it wasn't like some people bought it and then they really loved it and they started to tell their friends and it built and built and built. It just started fucking huge, and like all launches, declined from there. So if anything, word of mouth probably put people off. No, that's not true.
I don't think that's true. Like I've seen people saying really good things about it.
Yeah. It's actually been wonderful, the things people have been sending me, because they're all sharing stories of things that happened to them in the game, and they're all things that, didn't happen to other people. And that's something we didn't have with Gunpoint. Gunpoint was, people liked it, and people did find some clever solutions, but the game it wasn't on rails, but it constrained the scope of your solutions. It was like, you are trying to do this with these tools, and there are X ways to do that. Whereas heat signature, because it's all random, I don't even know what challenges you're facing, and I don't know what tools you have. It's all just crazy, and it's great hearing those stories. I love it. I saw somebody saying, I just saw a tweet called saying, "Oh man, having great fun playing Heatsig. Here's my story about it." And I actually went away and did something else, and I came back 25 minutes later, and the guy was still tweeting, still new tweets in the thread.
Oh wow!
And we asked people to share GIFs and videos and stuff, because we're doing a sort of thing where the best of those will become our trading cards. We want to sort of tell those stories. And so people are sharing lots of those, but obviously they have an incentive to do that, so that you can't read too much into that. But the stories, we didn't give any incentive for that. We didn't ask people to do that. That's just something people are doing because they want to share them.
Oh.
So that's really nice. Today we got fan art that someone did of his own characters. He had a pair of brothers where one of them had to rescue the other one, and there's a chance each time you have a mission to rescue a relative or anyone, there's I think it's like a 20% chance we'll just add the word idiot in front of them. So rescue my idiot brother, and he obviously got that because his drawing was of the brother and his idiot brother.
Nice. I was wondering, I should probably ask John this, like what it's like to get fan art of the thing that you did the art for.
Yeah.
Because that must be an interesting experience, like whether it's kind of, oh wow, I didn't think of it like that, or...
Yeah, particularly with this, because he must be looking at that fan art trying to figure out which... because, they're not characters that are in the game, they're randomly generated ones, so he's probably figuring out, like, oh, did they get headpiece 3B with torso 6A?
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. But, like... I'm glad that it's got done so well. I know that Chris has been playing it, and he managed to... I didn't quite follow it because I didn't know the mission that he was talking about, but he managed to do something incredibly stupid but also incredibly good at the same time. It sounded like he just catapulted himself out into space in a fit of hubris.
That sounds like Chris. There's a mission... so in addition to the sort of main game where you're playing as a character who takes on lots of missions, and if you survive you continue doing them, there are also these one-off defector missions where you play as a preset character with a preset inventory on a preset ship. It's a little bit randomly generated, but the parameters of like what challenges you're facing are set, and there's just one of those where you start with no pod, so you just start in space and you have to propel yourself with by firing guns to reach your target. It starts pretty close to you, but it's already moving away, so you've got to kind of catch up and drift over there. Chris was telling me he did that mission, got on the ship and killed everyone, took out his target, and then just sort of blew out a window and shot himself into space, thinking he was going to pick himself up with his pod, but forgot he didn't have a pod on this mission. And so then just had to propel himself all the way back round to the airlock and get back inside.
Oh, nice. But what's it been like? Because when I saw you... when I saw you the first time after, it was the day after, and you were kind of in that dazed space of, not entirely sure what's going on. And then I saw you, I think, 2 days after that for the launch party. And then, so now has it sort of sunk in, or like, what's the feeling?
Like 1 day after, really... The numbers looked incredibly good, but it was very hard to know, is this going to stay like this all week? Is it going to stay like this for the next 4 years? Because I have 4 years of data on Gunpoint. And so it's really tempting to try and extrapolate out and say, oh, if I did this in this many days, then you multiply that by this and you get that. But you don't really know because anything can change. And in particular, we had a really big drop yesterday in sales. And I was panicking about that. And because I looked at Gunpoint, and Gunpoint didn't have a big drop in its 5th day. But the other factor is that 5 days after Gunpoint's launch, it was the first weekend since it launched. And 5 days after Heat Signature's launch, it was the first weekday since the first couple of days. And I don't know, haven't heard this anywhere else, but my theory is that you sell more on weekends and less on weekdays on Steam. Most of the internet works on the opposite principle. Like, the internet is generally busier on weekdays, but it would make sense for Steam to not follow that rule because it is, buying games, you're probably going to buy games when you have time to play them. So that would make sense. And now that we have another day of data after that, I can see that it's held steady since then. So it's not, like when there's one drop at the time, you don't know if this is just it normalizing to a normal level, or whether it's like, oh yeah, this day we lost half our sales, the next day we lost the other half. And then it makes another $1. That's the scary part. But even then, I mean, that was just, it was just the only hint of anything going in any way, wrong since the start. And it just kind of shook me a bit because I've been making all these projections of like, oh, if it does this, then it does this. And I knew not to be 100% sure of those things, but then suddenly it was like, oh god, am I completely wrong? Am all my projections totally off? If it did stop selling completely right now, I would be okay. It wouldn't be quite as big a success as it looks right now. But I think that's unlikely. I don't think that usually happens. I haven't heard of anyone whose game just literally never sold another copy after day 6, unless they like broke the law or something.
Yeah, not unless it gets like yanked from sale, I would assume.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's, that part of it has settled down. But I still find, all my indie friends have stories about the thing that made their launch a stressful hell. And for me with Gunpoint, it was tech support. It was that people, a perfectly normal percentage of people having trouble, like, less than 1%. But because I wasn't a programmer and I was the only programmer, I didn't have any confidence I could ever fix these problems. So it was just like, oh god. And also there's no refund system, so I couldn't give them their money back. And I also couldn't give them the game they wanted. And I felt like I'd, ripped them off. But in the end, I fixed a bunch of those, and then we changed engines to try and fix the rest of them. And then the refund system happened, so it's not a problem anymore. And this time I have a programmer who handles most of that stuff and also just gives me confidence that we'll fix this, we'll figure it out. And so this time, there hasn't really been one thing, it's just that I'm in this like heightened state of like everything is going to affect me way more than normal. And so, yeah, that like dip yesterday, which in the grand scheme of things is totally normal, was like, oh god, is the sky falling? Is it all over? And I'm also just feeling like, it's great having all this, all these stories coming in and stuff, but also people are, if they see like a bug or a glitch they want to report, they'll often do it to me on Twitter, rather than through the normal bug reporting form. And that means there's also just this random distribution of somewhat negative stuff. It's not, they're not actually complaining or pissed off. They're just saying, oh, I think this UI doesn't work, or this is thing. And I'm just in this like ultra sensitive state where I can't take any criticism at all. So, I just have to like not look at it when that happens. At some point I'll go through it and figure this stuff out. And also if it's a serious thing, people will be filing bug reports and, John will be seeing it. But like right now I can't really deal with any criticism, so I'm just trying to like hide from it. I haven't really read
Twitter
reviews.
is like completely unusable right now.
Well, it's, like I say, it's mostly full of just people telling great stories and sharing clips and stuff, and so that's lovely. So there's like, for every minor bug report, there's like 9 great bits of either people being really happy with the game or people specifically saying how much they like it. So that's
maybe if you hire like an intern as a buffer,
I'm really thinking about this.
Sift
actually.
everything else off into like a little bucket of later.
It's okay for heat signature because there's going to be, if I can ever finish the current batch of like organizational tasks that I've been putting off, and just get enough breathing room to take a bit of a break, I'm going to have some distance on it, and I can already feel that happening. I've started in a new document. There's been the heat signature -thoughts.txt has been my scribbling pad for this for 4 years, and now I started a heat signature -new thoughts.txt, which is just sort of figuring out what, if anything, do I want to change. And I'm already finding like, I suddenly like feel much freer about it. Towards the end, you're trying to lock everything down. So it's like, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. It's too much. It's going to might mess with this. We don't have enough time to test that. Anything like that has to just go. You can't make any big changes. And now I'm in the point where I'm not going to make any big changes, but they're just like things like, just weird little item ideas or something that, that might work, or it might turn out to be a waste of time. Before launch, that would be absolutely no, don't do it. Now it's like, yeah, I could experiment with that at some point. I don't know when, but, so yeah, that when I do have some distance, I'll also go back and I'll read the reviews and I'll figure out, I probably won't, I'm not going to go scouring for negatives, but I'll just get a rough idea of, what the common, sticking points are and see if they're the kinds of things I can do anything about. Probably most of them I can't, because I've heard from one guy who's just really annoyed that there's permadeath, and it's like, well, I don't think we're going to take permadeath out at this point. I think that would be putting a bit of a switcheroo on the people who bought it. So yeah, I don't know what I will do to it, but it's nice it will be nice to have some breathing room and to get away from it for a little bit and then come back to it. I hear you have some news.
Yes, I have a new job.
Yay!
Yay! I have Chris's old job.
Which is weird.
It's very different, I think, because we've spoken a bit about it, because obviously, and I think it's actually a very different sense of a thing, because obviously, so if you don't know, I'm now the deputy editor of PC Gamer magazine, and so that means I have stopped doing RPS type things, because obviously
Bit of a conflict.
and moved from the internet to print, which is really interesting. And so the person that I will be working most closely with, and have started to already, is Phil Savage, who's the current editor. And so it's this interesting thing where, like, the editor and the deputy editor, like, it's a different partnership, every kind of different pairing. And so I think, because when it was Chris, he was working with Graham, and so they're very different people again than me and Phil. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens, and also, you know, just really exciting to come up with different ideas and hopefully gradually see them in print. So that's really exciting. I never get to hold anything I do apart from if I print it out. And that's weird.
Yeah, that robs it of the specialness, doesn't it, if you printed it yourself?
Yeah, it's not shiny, there's no page numbers if you don't put them on yourself, you know.
Are you going to be the brutal, hard taskmaster of PCG, or the nice pushover of PCG?
Oh goodness, I
Those are
don't
two classes you
know.
can choose from.
Is it really?
No, everyone is in between those two.
I don't know. I think I wouldn't know. I'm not by nature a brutal, mean person. I think I can accidentally be quite cutting about things, especially if they do not please me. But that tends to be more, you know, hot takes of the internet variety, or, you know, that kind of, sort of, it's if things are badly researched or just daft that I tend to roll my eyes or make some sort of, remark that I maybe regret. Also, if scrapbooking comes up, I can't stand scrapbooking. I get so cross about it.
Just people doing it?
So not people doing it, because I appreciate that it's like part of, you know, valuing your memories and like presenting them in a particular way, and like, you know, that's a really cool thing to do. It's more the way that the companies who make a lot of the products that people use for scrapbooking, like, sort of take on so much of the work in some cases that you're essentially just giving people almost like a template, and then like so many people end up with the same memory, just a different specific photo that they've jammed in or something, and you end up in these really weird situations with, it's like card toppers. Like, card toppers are kind of like these pre-made, decorative things with like adhesive backs usually, and they essentially form the bulk of a card, and then you just plonk it onto the card that you'd like to use it for, and then there you go, you have your own, and like, in air quotes, handmade card. And so, you know, I just get a bit funny about craft that isn't really craft.
You use for cards but not for scrapbooking?
So some of it, like, it's a similar idea, like, you can get a lot of, like, embellishments, but some of them are, like, really complicated and form almost like picture frames for photos. And they have their uses and stuff, but, like, sometimes it's almost like you just sort of are giving people this cookie cutter template and pretending that it's unique. There's something about it that really, really rubs me up the wrong way.
How do you feel about, Snapchat dog ears?
I am too old to be using Snapchat, so...
But does it bother you that everyone's selfies are effectively the same because they're all wearing the same dog ears and the same weird tongue thing.
I don't know. I kind of find that interesting, but I think that that's mostly because I'm being a contrary dick.
I find it interesting because I find its popularity interesting.
Yeah.
It's just a thing I just stumbled across and be like, oh, that's dumb.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's like so universally, like that one in particular,
Yeah.
it's just almost every human who used their services has used it. And I think it's because taking photos of yourself and sharing on the internet can be a really healthy and positive thing. But I think the people who are maybe hesitant to do it, the reason is they don't have a sort of pretext to do it. Like if they're in a cool place or something, they won't hesitate to take a photo of themselves in the cool place and share that, and then they'll get some of the benefits of a selfie without having to sort of be that person who posts selfies. And I think the dog ears do the same thing. Like there's just kind of a pretext to share a selfie and get the benefit of that.
I think that maybe speaks more to the kinds of people that we know.
I'm talking about me.
Well, I was going to say, because I don't think that you do need a pretext to post a selfie, like, nowadays particularly. It's more that, like, there are so many fascinating podcasts about how, especially teen girls use, Snapchat and Instagram and things like that. And, you know, the threshold by which you judge whether something was a good post or not, and whether you then keep it up or whether it's shameful enough that you take it down instantly, or, you know, you try the same thing again the next day but in a slightly different pose, or, you know, that kind of thing. And there was also a really interesting BBC podcast, I think it's their food podcast, about clean eating and that relationship with Instagram, and it digs into, you know, what is positioned as healthy and aesthetically so. And so that was really interesting. And there's sort of someone on there made a really interesting point about the way that funding works, and how there aren't actually that many studies about how Instagram specifically changes or potentially impacts how people's self-esteem works. But it's possibly because the research is conducted by maybe the generation up from those that are using Instagram at the moment, but the funding comes from the generation up from that. And so there's a kind of disconnect between who's using the thing and valuing it, and where the research sort of potential or value proposition lies. Anyway, that was quite the digression. But yes, I don't know. I don't think I will be a brutal deputy editor.
Unless these subjects come up. You've been warned, PC Gamer staff.
Wow.
That's actually why Tom Senior isn't here, is because he was caught scrapbooking at work and Pip would not let him leave until he wrote an essay on the evils of over-templated scrapbooking.
The fact that he still hasn't finished that is very pleasing to me. It means there's a lot to say. But yeah, so, although to be fair, I worked from home today for various technical IT-based reasons, and so you asked what it was like working for PCG, and I was like, well, I worked from my room, same as last week. I wrote about indie games, same as last week, and I had Alice in a chat box so that we could talk about Judi Dench, so same as last week, really. But, you know, I'm really excited, and I think it's going to be awesome. So, yeah. There was also Plunk news, if you wanted to have some actual, like, external to us.
Apparently people other than us had news this week.
And it was essentially that there was that slightly confusing press release that Bluehole, who develop PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, put out, that was essentially a kind of odd warning shot to Epic Games about Fortnite's Battle Royale mode, and that essentially they were keeping an eye on it, and, you know...
Something like, well, we consider further action.
I think it was essentially... It sounded like they were... To me, reading it was a confusing press release. It really was. And reading it, it sounded very much like they were sort of doing that thing of trying to make it clear that this was a situation that they were aware of and would be monitoring, almost like a kind of public warning to Epic as a, like perhaps that would be effective in a way that a private email wouldn't be or something. But then I believe, I think it was Chris Livingston did a kind of clarification interview that went up on the PC Gamer website, and essentially it sounded more like they were having the issue was with the fact that Fortnite was obviously an Epic game, an Epic own Unreal Engine, and that's what Bluehole are licensing and paying royalties because it's a really successful game, so that's a lot of money. And they are working with Epic to sort of have support for that engine, and so the changes that they are working with Epic to make will obviously be useful for their game, but could also be being used by Epic for Fortnite. And I think there was, that's where it sounded like that was where the animosity was creeping in. But at the same time, I was kind of doing a bit of reading round on this and just sort of trying to figure out bits and pieces. Cause I get why it is, an annoyance, why, if you're working on a thing and you're sort of asking for specific help to try and make a thing happen, and then maybe if you see it pop up in another game, that's galling and it chafes. But at the same time, I actually was looking through some blog posts about the pros and cons of licensing engines, because I'm fun at parties. And one of the points that someone made, and I was looking through the end user license agreement for Unreal Engine. I mean, obviously Bluehole might well have their own custom agreement, and this might well be null and void. But I think one of the actual parts of that is that you agree not to sue Epic. And so if they have signed a version of that, then I don't even know what the action that they could take is, apart from re-engineering the game,
Maybe that's why they're doing it in this posturing way of making it sound like they're going to. Epic know they can't, they know they can't, but the public now thinks, ooh, Epic are in trouble for this bad thing they did, and that might force Epic's hand in some way.
So that's what I'm thinking, in the way of it's using your public,
I think
persona to add pressure, but
I think it may be, if the goal was to do with public opinion, it might have backfired on them a bit, because it came out sound like the sort of the surface level story that kind of got passed around was they're suing Epic for making a Battlegrounds, for making a Battle Royale style game, and of course they did not invent Battle Royale.
Brendan Green, who is PlayerUnknown, has said in multiple interviews, I'm not even going to pretend to claim ownership of that genre, and it's so odd.
That's what they've made it. That's what it's ended up looking like on the surface level, and so I don't think it's won them much favour in the public eye, even if that isn't really the substance of their argument.
So it's all a bit weird, but then again, it also feels like PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds rather is this absolute juggernaut at the moment, because they surpassed, they've already surpassed the Steam, the Dota 2 concurrent players, but then I think maybe last week they went past 1.5 million concurrent players. These are absolutely ridiculous numbers, properly ridiculous.
Because they passed the Dota's all-time record, right? It's
something like that, right?
And it just seems to be continually growing. This is a game that costs, what is it?
Is it 35 quid maybe?
Yeah, something like that. Versus a game that's free. Dota's free, and I've
well, you say free. Do not ever look at my purchase.
You can spend money. You don't have to. And so, if you're looking at, a revenue comparison, it would be pretty much meaningless, because it would tell you more about spending habits than popularity. But concurrent players is a pretty good measure of people actually being interested in this thing and playing it. And I have released a paid games and free games, and the difference in player base is startling. So Floating Point is my free game on Steam, and that is consistently ahead of Gunpoint in players, and that's a game no one's heard of. Like, no one comes up to me and says, "Oh yeah, I love Floating Point."
Really? Not even if they're really into grappling hooks and geometry.
Oh well, I've talked about it with some people who I've like showed it to in person and stuff. And sometimes we eventually, like later in the conversation, when they figure out, "Oh, I did play that grappling hook game." But it's not a known game to the extent that Gunpoint is.
Because you know that my skill set means that if you and I were complete strangers, that is the thing that I would say to you. Like, "You're the Floating Point guy." And everyone would be like, "What about Gunpoint?" I'm like, "I was bad at Gunpoint. I didn't get far." And then, "But what about Heat Signature?" It's like, Tom and I are opposites. We do not play games the same way. We just don't. So yeah, Floating Point. Oh yes.
Cool. Yeah, that's got like 980,000 players. And it's because it's free. And so there's a big difference, like being free is a big win. And so the fact that PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is ahead of Dota, even though Dota is free and Battlegrounds is quite expensive, is pretty incredible. It makes me wonder what we would have seen if Minecraft had been on Steam. Because, I mean, I guess we had Minecraft sales figures, it just no one compared it to. I guess we don't really have Steam sales figures, that's the thing.
Yeah.
We don't have Valve's games, and Valve games are usually the top of these things. It's interesting, actually. I guess they haven't really been. Strangely, their own storefront slightly screws them because it doesn't give games like Dota any kind of slots because there's the top sellers is done by revenue. So if you're a free game, you just don't get in there. I don't actually know whether in-app purchases count towards your revenue in there. I don't think so, because I think it's just sort of, I don't know. Because there's, in the Steam sort of workings, there's something called a package, and when you buy something on the store, you're getting a package, and a package can contain apps. I guess maybe a package can also contain in-game content, I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised just sort of architecturally if it's just games that people have bought, and so...
But the thing with Dota was that when it was in beta, like they seeded, special beta keys that would just keep refreshing in people's what's it called? Not the
inventory.
Inbox, but in your inventory, and you'd then just try and get rid of the damn things and give them to other people, and sort of also you'd want people to play with because then that's less toxic, and you'd want a team or you'd want to coordinate, and so I think that they not took advantage exactly, because I don't want to imply it was like monopolistic, but I think obviously like there was an element of, we're using our platform to promote this thing. And then the other thing I guess is that Dota's a free game, but at the same time with those kinds of things, you make money off people willing to spend shed tons of money within that ecosystem, right? So maybe like, because with Plunkbat, I mean, obviously it's got microtransactions and things, and you can do all kinds of things to just get loot boxes, right? But the big thing is, you want that 35 quid as someone comes through the door, right? Whereas with Dota, it's more, maybe it would be fine even if they halved their player base, as long as it was the ones that are willing to keep throwing money at wizard hats or battle passes.
Because Battlegrounds are selling like dirty grey shirts, aren't they? That's their monetization model.
I hate the outfits.
Actually, I had more than one person tell me that they sold a shitty t-shirt and Battlegrounds to pay for Heat Signature. Couldn't afford it, so I sold a bad t-shirt.
Yeah, no, the clothing is so ugly. Actually, so if we just morph this into what I have been playing, because I started playing Plunkbat with Alice. So that was actually our final chat, was starting to play Plunkbat together. And so one of the things that I did was I actually didn't have a choice about who I was playing, because I was using the RPS Press account and Adam had already built a character, and so I had what was essentially business casual Jason Statham in kind of, sort of smart casual cargo pants and, a white collared shirt with like a tie. And yeah, so, but it was just so depressing, and I tried to ameliorate things by opening a loot chest with some of Adam's credits, which let's just gloss right over that one.
You'll be interested to hear this.
And all it gave me was a V-neck red t-shirt. And I was like, you're kidding me. Like, I think I don't know what the exact real money to plunk bucks, exchange rate.
Please tell me they call them plunk bucks.
Well, if they don't, they should, and I won't hear of any other options. But I don't think that that's even worth the amount that it would translate to in real life, right? Because you can get a red V-neck t-shirt from, a bargain, like from H&M or something, and it'll cost you, $2.99. So I am not putting up with this nonsense in a game.
They should do because H&M did like a tie-in pack with The Sims, right? Where you buy H&M clothes. They should do that for Battlegrounds.
But they also had, cause I, how it gives you the preview of what that chest could contain. So as to make you go, oh, maybe the next one will be this thing.
Green V-neck.
I know. And there seem to be other options that I would infinitely have preferred, but I don't know if they're gender gated. Like there was a kind of a cool looking kilt that I thought, like a kilt skirt thing. But I don't know if that was gated to the female characters, and you can't switch gender without it costing you more plunk bucks once you've assigned your character and stuff like that.
I can't remember now. I did play and I did have a character. Do you make your character or is it random?
So I genuinely don't know because, like I say, I was just there with whatever Adam had
I feel like
picked.
I made my character. I might be wrong.
I think that you do to start with, but then once that's locked in, it's kind of almost like if you've locked to a region and you have to pay to move it to a different server or something. So that was an annoying thing. Although I did find out that as you move through a level, move through the map when you're playing, you can also obviously loot things and take clothes off other people. So I ended up with the long coat and, some goggles and things to offset the business elements of my outfit. So, there were definitely highs, but I've also seen the awful, awful outfits that came as part of, I think there was a Twitch tie-in and it was just oh God, that's so ugly. So there was a lot of, and I don't really know whether, because obviously if you go in with something that Liberace would have been happy to wear, then you'll probably get picked off a mile away because you're encumbered by, sparkly, encrustings of embellishments. So maybe that's not the way forward either, but
I can see it as the weird crapness of their clothes makes a certain amount of sense really because, or it's almost the way I would want to approach it, which is the game is massively successful already. And so the question I want to answer is what kind of thing can we make money from? And so you don't really want to go all out on the first round of clothes. You don't want it to be crazy ostentatious stuff that could change the look of the game. You don't want to go full TF2, for example, where their items make really outlandish. And Overwatch skins as well are really massively different to the point that you sometimes just can't tell what class a character is. And you don't want to do that for game design reasons, but also it's I think it's maybe a good sort of control case for microtransactions to see okay, if you will buy this shit, then this system is very promising. And when we start doing stuff that's actually good, it'll take off. But taking a baby step towards it makes sense.
I wonder if they'll do a workshop version because
Counter-Strike had a workshop, but putting stuff in the workshop didn't let anyone else actually use it. It was sort of submitting it to Valve, really, or submitting it for public approval, and then if it got public approval, Valve would look at it and maybe put it in the game. But then if they did, you would get a cut of the profits from everyone buying and selling that thing, and that was huge. Yeah,
and with Dota, there was it was a similar thing, but there were also some really interesting provisos because I think it feels like they've become more lax with it over time, but there were definitely at the beginning a lot of restrictions on you must stick to the right colour palette for this hero, you can't significantly change their outline, there were a lot of things like that to factor into whatever you were doing. But to be honest, I would argue that they don't really hold to that anymore, because the amount of times I've tried to play a game and it's like, who even is that hero right now? Oh, it's that guy. Oh, okay. Well, or, you know, there's so many particle effects because of so many limited edition, like hyper, you know, collectible treasures that you're just like, I can't even see the game for particle effects right now. So just calm it down.
Because Valve always have those rules, and they seem to break them later on. Because TF2, they made a huge deal about the silhouettes, right? And the silhouettes were how you identify. You should be able to identify a class by its silhouette alone. So there's never any mistake. And then the cosmetic items drastically change the silhouettes. And I guess, I mean, maybe they just do tests and they find, this doesn't bother people, or it doesn't.
Or maybe they just do it the other way around, you know, like if they like a thing enough, then they'll add it in, and if people complain, then they reassess afterwards. But I think with Overwatch, it might be less of an issue. I don't really play Overwatch anymore, so I wouldn't be able to speak to this from a player perspective, but I know that when I've been to design talks, they've spoken about the many different ways that they've tried to differentiate heroes. So you would have, it's not just their outline, it's things like their footfall. You're supposed to be able to tell the difference between different gait and different, you know, like...
I don't think I can.
I think you probably could with the more pronounced ones. So, for example...
Yeah, Roadhog, I can believe.
Or Junkrat, because he's got a peg leg, right? So, but it's supposed to be that you can tell them apart in multiple different ways. So I would be interested in whether perhaps cosmetics factored into that, so it was less of a legibility issue. But to be honest, in Plunkbat, like, anyone that isn't on voice comms with you is a legit target, right? So you're essentially, maybe it's just a case of you don't need to know who they are, you just need to know that they're not with you.
There aren't that many visibility problems with that. There could be like art style problems, I guess, if they go too outlandish with it. It might kind of spoil, because that's quite a gritty feel. It's pretty bleak.
See, I really liked Alice's description of it, which is essentially it feels like the aftermath of a stag and hen weekend abroad. Like everyone just like, you know...
falling out of a plane.
Essentially. But, you know, just sort of waking up after a few days on the lash, you know, in the middle of a stretch of farmland or whatever, and not really quite remembering what you did, but, you know, still being in your jeans and t-shirt from the night before and needing to make your way back, or like get the group across the wilderness or something. So I quite like that, this kind of bleak stag do. So yeah, sounded fun. But then, and now they've added this camper van or whatever, the VW camper thing, so you can
just
kind
as
of
a drivable vehicle thing.
As a kind of the least lads tour vehicle for the lads. It's like, sure. So yeah, so I've played 2 games now, 2 matches.
Cool. Where did you land? Sorry, that could be interpreted 2 ways in this game. Where did you end up on the scoreboard?
So in the first match, I think we ended up about 36th.
Okay.
Which I don't know whether that's good or bad. It's not last. I know that.
I would say it's in the 36th percentile.
Yeah. And because my something had glitched out, so I was actually seeing giant triangles like beaming down from the sky. So I mean,
again, like the next morning after.
Not all was well on my end, let's say. And I had to crank the graphic settings right back down because it was just not happy with anything I was doing. And it was like juddering out to the point where I think I landed in a tree but didn't find out about it until Alice came and like checked on me. It was like, are you there? And she's going, yes, what are you? So well, I think so. So that was good. And then I think the next one we were about 40 something. But in that one, I had a gun, which is not what happened in the first one. I picked one up just as I was getting shot and then worked out ammo as I died. But the second one, I actually exchanged fire with someone.
Wow.
Unsuccessfully, but I want it on record that I shot at a person.
I kind of like how Battlegrounds gunfights feel as shitty and nightmarish and horrible as real gunfights probably do. Like, you're just getting hit from fucking who knows where, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if you do manage to fight back, it's because you get the jump on somebody, and it's not like cinematic violence. It's really just, I guess, like Operation Flashpoint and DayZ and everything that derives from that lineage.
My one and only firefight was a lot like, I think it's Police Academy, where Frank Drebin is like exchanging fire with a ne'er-do-well, and it turns out they're about 3 feet apart, and they've managed to miss each other with the entire thing, so then they just throw their guns at each other. It was very much that level of, ineptitude.
That sounds like a good segue into XCOM. People being really close to each other and not hitting each other.
Excellent.
I actually don't have that problem as much as most people do. I enjoy the running joke, but if I take a shot that's like 95%, I know it can miss. And not when it does miss. Actually, no, I suppose there's two separate problems, isn't there? There's one cliche about XCOM is like, oh, they missed the 99% shot every time. And then the other cliche is, oh, they're 1 foot away or they're point blank and they got a 60% chance to hit. And that one does bother me because it feels like, in particular, like certain weapons I think are actually penalised for being close. It feels like a sniper rifle, if someone's close enough, you sort of get a penalty for it. And that also, combines badly with the fact that any given chance can go against you, even if it's heavily in your favour. But yeah, it's, I'm still playing it. I'm still playing War of the Chosen. Steam says I played 175 hours of XCOM 2, and I think I've only finished one campaign, and so this is my second campaign. So campaigns take about 100 hours, I reckon. Or at least, I think about 100 of that must be War of the Chosen's. And the first one, XCOM 2 base game, is probably, 75. God, I played most of a campaign on PlayStation as well. So that's not even counted in that. I've already played like 250 hours of XCOM 2. And I played XCOM 1 as well, and the expansion for that. I play a lot of XCOM.
You've got a lot of value out of that XCOM.
Yeah. It's strange because in some ways this is the best it's ever been, and in some ways it's the worst it's ever been. It's right now I'm kind of enjoying it less than I ever have before because, this campaign is really dragging on. It's the expansion and I've got all the DLC installed and, DLC actually I'm not, there are missions relating to that and I have those turned off, so I've just got the items for them. But the Alien Rulers DLC, or Alien Hunters I think the DLC is called, adds these alien rulers who can show up on any mission, and they are like boss battles. And so you've got 3 of those boss battles, and then you've also got the Chosen, who are not just boss battles, but like boss campaigns in and of themselves. And so that's gone a long time. I focused on that initially, and then now I'm getting around to like the normal campaign, which is the Avatar project. And there's so much stuff just happening all the time, interrupting everything you're trying to do, and then it's really strange that to complete the main quest, there's just like for one thing, there's a bunch of things you could just go research, and so while you're researching those, you're not researching cool guns and armor. And then when you get the Shadow Chamber, that's like the sort of plot room, and that does plot stuff. All the things you have to do in that are essentially research projects that just take quite a long time, and you can't research anything else while you're doing them. And so it just means you just can't research anything for like, about a month of game time. And that's just kind of boring. It just means nothing's changing in terms of like what stuff you have access to. It feels, as well as actually reducing the, actual mechanical progression, it also just feels even worse than it really is because it's like, you're delaying those things. You have these things to do in the game saying, nope, don't do those yet. Got to do this first. Like, do your homework first before you get to have the fun. And there's just a lot of homework. And so I've rebelled against that and I've done everything else first. So, I've like got the top tier weapons and the top tier armor, and now I'm just now getting to like the early game research projects for the main quest. And yeah, it's the thing there are just a bunch of little consequences of all the things they've added. All the things they've added, well, pretty much all the things they've added are a good idea in and of themselves, but the sum total now is unwieldy. I talked before about how it's overwhelming. You know, it's just so much stuff going on all the time.
It sounds beyond bloated for a newcomer. Like, I would not pick up War of the Chosen as a first.
Yeah, it's also, I think it's just straight harder. Like, it adds... so it has these bosses that are very challenging, and they can show up on any mission, so the difficulty is very random. And the only benefit you get is that after you kill them, you get their weapons. And their weapons are incredibly powerful. Like, they'll make a soldier twice as powerful, basically. And so that's another weird thing where that means that it's a thing that makes the game harder at first and then easier when you win, which is already the game's problem. And then the other problem is because, so those chosen add like 3 good sets of items, really good sets of items. The Shen's Last Gift DLC adds 3 or 4 really good weapons, which are unique. And then the Alien Hunters DLC adds 3 really good suits of armor. And the problem with all of this is that the game has actually, it's got much better. One of the problems they really have solved is the problem of using the same squad in every mission. They haven't quite solved the snowballing problem, which is related, but you know, where the better you do, the easier it gets, and therefore the better you do, and therefore the easier it gets. And on the other side, the worse you do, the harder it gets, and therefore the worse you do. But they have solved that I no longer take the same 6 people on every mission, because as well as the old thing where if they're wounded, they have to be benched, they also can get tired, and then you have to bench them. And sometimes there's a covert op that requires someone of like major rank, and that's going to be one of your best guys no matter what. And you've got to send them on this mission, and while they're away on that mission, they can't be in any actual missions. And so I now do change the people around all the time, which is good. But combine that with the fact that there's this one set of incredibly good gear. There's basically 6 loadouts that are really, really powerful. And every time I deploy a squad, it's different people. The good equipment is on the other people who are benched. And the only way to transfer it is to go through each thing and like manually press a button to sort of release all accessory items and then go and equip the accessory ones you want. And then, so let's say like the medkit is on someone else and you're equipping a specialist, so you release the medkit and then you put the medkit on the specialist, and then you go to the next person, you also want to use some utility items on that person, and some of those utility items are in use, they're back in use again, even though you just did the thing to free them all up. Any ones that you don't equip then go back to the people they're already on, so you've got to keep re-freeing them again and again. There's 3 different classes of items you've got to do that for, and you've got to do that on every soldier. And that, the interface for it's just bad. Like, it's pretty easy to think of a better one. And it's such a hassle. And there's enough decision making in it that you can't sort of do it totally on autopilot. You've got to actually think about, but do I want to give the crossbow to this person? Because my squad's not just this, it's not just like a specialist, a sniper, a assault guy. This time it's like, we're not going to take any snipers. We're just going to take, grenadiers. So which loadout do we want? So there's enough thinking in it that you can't autopilot, but it's not really interesting. It's always going to be, we just want the best stuff. The best stuff we have, put it on these people in some order that makes some kind of sense. And like every now and then I might have a sort of an opinion about, I think I want the acid grenade on this person because they have a bonus that affects it. But there isn't enough of that stuff to make it interesting. And there's so much faff there, and it happens before every single mission because you're always changing your troops. And it's almost killing the game for me. I just, like, every time I get to that screen now, I just save and I quit and I just have to do something else for a while. And then when I come back and I feel like playing XCOM again, because I do love XCOM, I'll have enough energy to go through that process. But it's crazy because that's like, that feels solvable. And it's just a sort of, like, it's definitely a kind of design problem I can imagine not foreseeing. All the decisions that led to it made sense. It's cool to add new items. It makes sense that there's only one of them. It makes sense that you can transfer it between people. The sort of, if I was being like, I would be tempted if I was making a game like this to lock equipment to soldiers, which makes no sense at all, but it would mean there's none of this faffing because it just can't do it. If you decided to give that cool item to that soldier, that's their thing now. And maybe they like, it starts as a standard item, but they kind of like get good with it, and that's why it's a good item now, and so that's why you can't transfer it to other people. And, but like anything to get out of this, just endless equipping and unequipping and re-equipping.
Do you know whether the developers are thinking of changing anything on that front? Have they acknowledged that maybe it's a problem, or is it a thing that enough people are
I haven't really heard the equipment
frustrated about?
complaint anywhere. I was watching today Chris Bratt's interview with Jake Solomon at EGX, which is online now. And that's really interesting. But it's about the design problems they did solve. It's like, it's the journey towards arriving at XCOM Enemy Unknown, which is the previous game to this one. I'm sort of assuming that this is the end of XCOM 2. Nothing in the game says that, but, it's just that I think for XCOM 1 they did some DLC, they did one big expansion and then they moved on. And they've done one big expansion now, so maybe they will. I kind of hope they do, because I don't think the way forward is to add stuff to XCOM 2, and you can't really take stuff away. Like, people won't accept it if you say, we're removing this feature.
It's interesting because from everything that you've said, like, it sounds like the interstitial stuff is the problem. Like, if that was slimmed down, or if it sounds like there's a really uneasy tension between the things that you have to do, but also there are a few things that you don't have to do but would be nice to do, and you're never quite free to actually make those meaningful choices. You need to research this thing, you need to upgrade that thing, you need this room or that thing or whatever. And so it's always this unsatisfyingly linear thing where all you're really doing is choosing between the things that you need to do next, rather than making a meaningful thing. And it sounds like those bits between missions are the parts where it really chafes, or it isn't working particularly. Like, definitely. If you've got to just dip into the next one or move along, that would just be so much, I think people who like XCOM want to play more XCOM, so that's never the problem. Even if it's a hard as balls mission, it's like, sure, let me have another crack at it.
I will say I'm getting much more attached to my people. It's really, everyone's a colonel now, which is the highest rank you can get to. And
am I still alive?
You're not a colonel, actually. You're quite new. Because I only added you after, not the last podcast, but I think the one before.
After I was like, so am I in your game?
So you were the next newbie who came along.
And then Chris tried to kill me with a knife.
So you can read the full story of Chris and Pip's remarkable debut into my XCOM game on my blog. Chris was mind-controlled and tried to kill Pip. And Pip ran as far away as she could from Chris. Chris still spent his entire turn chasing her down, even though there were plenty of closer targets. And joke's on him, though, because he got captured at the end of that mission in a really awkward situation, and you didn't. We haven't had the chance to rescue him yet, but the other guy, one of the other people who got captured in that mission, there were a few casualties in that mission. Asher Volmer, creator of Threes, after creating Threes, he decided to wear a giant blue snake suit and smoke a cigar. And while doing that on a mission, we had to kind of abandon him. He was the one who could have got out, but only he would have escaped. And then we found a new strategy that involved leaving him behind but rescuing 3 other people, including you, Pip. And just recently we got the chance to rescue Asher, so Asher's back now.
Nice.
And more importantly, the cool snake suit he's wearing is back.
I'm just going to put this out there. Let's not worry about Chris. He'll probably be fine.
It's very strange because I don't think I've ever had the chance to rescue someone before in 175 hours of playing, and I got 2 in the same day. One was Asher and the other was Jane. We haven't had the chance to rescue Chris yet. If it comes up, I'll do it. Because...
I won't get out of my way.
Shall I leave you behind on that mission? I don't know. I'm not that invested, really. My favourite soldier is Amanda, who is our Templar, and Templar is like a sort of psionic melee warrior. And
are they the ones with the white hair? That's the psyops people.
Yeah. And Amanda the Templar has a melee class, and you have the chance to get some skills from the normal XCOM skill trees as well. And the one you happen to get was Bladestorm, and that means she can get free attacks on anyone who comes close to her. And as she does more attacks with her, magic sword fists, they gain in damage, and that also affects Bladestorm, so that her free attacks do more damage. And I've just recently got, she has an amazing sequence of abilities, because she can fire her pistol without ending a turn. then run at the person who just shot and stab them. And then stabbing them increases her stab damage and also gives her a parry ability that she can use at that same turn, which protects her from the next attack. And then when that person on their turn tries to attack her, they both get parried, and she gets Bladestorm on them, so she gets to stab them again. And now, I've just, now that she's Colonel, I've got access to her top tier abilities, and the one I chose is Ghost, which means after we killed a humanoid target, if she has 2 focus, she can raise a ghost out of them, and the ghost is a clone of her, and it just lasts until it runs out of focus, like it can, it can spend focus on the same spells she can. It doesn't have a pistol, interestingly, but that's it.
Because it's a ghost, Tom. Ghosts can't wield guns.
I also don't think they can stab people, but she can stab people, and she gets Bladestorm, so she gets all those other like perks that Amanda has. And so we had a mission where like we're on our way out. They've called reinforcements. Reinforcements are going to land close to our evac zone. Most of us can reach the evac zone, but one person can't, so we can't leave just yet. If that's going to happen, I leave everyone behind because I want them to be able to provide covering fire and stuff. And you see exactly where the reinforcements are going to come down. And Amanda and her ghost both had moves free. And so I just stood them both next to the flare where the people are going to land. So there's 2 people, both of whom have Bladestorm, right where those people land. And you get this whole cutscene of like when they rope down from their dropship and they look around and they point orders and they look all business-like and stuff. While that cutscene's going on, you can see like this glowing purple ghost and Amanda just standing there with their knives, like waiting. And as soon as they take their turn, suddenly it's like just like Bladestorm, 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 Bladestorm. But one of them was a purifier, and the purifiers can explode on death. And like right after I set them there and I finished my turn, I suddenly thought, oh god, what if there's a purifier? Because they're going to kill it, and they're going to kill it. Like the ghost dying doesn't matter, but Amanda dying would be terrible. And also there's quite a lot of friendlies around there. And there was a purifier. We killed everything except the purifier, and we got the purifier down to like 2 health. And he just ran and threw himself through a window. Like we're on a roof, and there's like another roof higher up, so there's like a window in front of us. And he just threw himself through that window and landed like on the ground floor. I think he's just looking for cover or something, but fictionally I like to think he's just like, all my friends just got knifed to death instantly. I'm nearly dead. I'm just going to run. And that was great because everyone else got to evac, but the ghost is like an apparition. It can't actually come with us. I don't know if can it come with us? I haven't tried. I don't think it matters if it comes with us because she can make a new one. And so it is just left, doesn't matter what happens to it. And so normally we wouldn't really bother to stop and kill an enemy left behind just for the hell of it, because it would delay the whole thing a turn and there might be more reinforcements or whatever. So everyone else left, and I just sent the ghost down to just stab this purifier, knowing full well it might blow up and destroy her. Just finish him off. So that poor guy threw himself through a window and was cowering down there. Everyone else leaves and the psychic ghost is just left behind. It's like it's just you and me now. Oh god.
But see, this is what I mean about you and me being opposites with games, because you've set up all of these amazing interactions and chain reactions and loadouts or whatever else, and I would just be running away from people with knives. That's not even like an in-game character thing. That's my MO with this stuff. It's like, do you know what? I'll leave this for someone else because I don't want to deal with these alien interlopers or whatever. No.
The other cool thing that happened was we were fighting an alien ruler, and they're more powerful than the Chosen, actually. They have an insane amount of health, like sort of 4 or 5 times what a tough enemy would normally have. And the idea is you attack them and you do some damage to them, but they probably escape the first time you fight them because as soon as they take some damage, they'll create a portal and go towards it.
Are they kind of bullet spongy?
Yeah, a little bit, but also everything you do gives them a free move. So every time you attack them, they get to move a bit closer to that portal, and the portal's really close, so they just get out. And so you never really kill them on your first encounter, but that damage you do to them is persistent, so next time you fight them, they'll have that same health lost. So I'd done a couple of those, and it had been like 2 or 3 fights usually before we kill them. And then the last one was the Archon King, and he's like a flying dude, and they're incredibly hard to hit. They're always dodging shots, and so you get like 1 or 2 damage instead of 10 or 12 damage on them. And it had this crazy health bar, like 35 hit points or something. The first time countering it, it's also, can fly. It's incredibly fast, incredibly hard to hit. We have no chance of taking this out in our first go. And Amanda's discovered it. She's the one who's like aggroed it. She went on ahead because she's melee.
She would.
Because she's melee, I kind of use her often to go ahead first because she needs to be close to the enemies anyway.
Is she someone based on someone you know in real life?
Yeah, Amanda Williams, who used to work at Tiger Style, who did Waking Mars.
Oh, okay.
And Spider, Right to the Shrouded Moon.
Oh.
Am I saying that right? So she discovers the Archon King. The Archon King gets one move, and doesn't like kill her or anything. And so she's in a position where she could like stab it or something, but it's not going to do a huge amount of good. And the real problem is no one else is nearby. Like no one else has a shot on it. And so she uses one of her moves to run back to everybody else, and then she uses her other move to swap with him because she has a move called Invert that just means she can change places with an enemy. So basically, she gets into line of fire with all of our friends, and then she switches to the Archon King. So now the Archon King is in line of fire with all our friends, and then Cook, friend of the podcast, who is our skirmisher, he just had him take a shot at it. By doing this, of course, the Archon King gets a free action, and his free action is to soar up into the sky like 100 feet and summon, I think it's called Devastation, and it just marks 4 of us with basically artillery that's going to land on us next turn. Mike takes a shot at him. Mike has a thing on his gun called a repeater, which I'd completely forgotten about. Basically, Mike fires him and it just says executed. The Archon King just fucking dies.
Wow!
Just straight up, one shot as our first attack against him, just outright kills him from full health. Because Mike has a device on his gun that gives him a 15% chance to just outright kill whenever he shoots at.
Oh my god.
And there's just really, impressively, there's no exception for bosses or anything. It's just whoever you fucking shoot, they fucking die.
Oh wow.
And it was great because the thing Amanda did was really clever, and the thing Mike did took no skill or anything. But I got to feel like my clever thing paid off because it did. It just completely outright killed this thing. And now we're wearing its skin. Because that's how it works with the alien rules. You get to wear their skin afterwards. So that ridiculous snake suit, that's one of the other alien rules we killed. And then this one is a suit that lets you basically teleport. You fly up into the sky and land where you want to go, but there's no restrictions on it, so you can just go anywhere.
Huh.
And that's awesome. So XCOM, bad and good.
Nice.
That's my verdict. It's a good job I don't review games anymore.
I don't know, that's pretty much all games, isn't it? It's if you like this kind of thing, you'll like it. There's some positives, maybe a few negatives.
Yep, that's more or less it.
Expect more of this in PC Gamer.
All the PC Gamer listening to this oh my god. She has no idea what she's doing.
70. That's a thing, that's a number. That's going to be a thing, actually. It's trying to remember how to assign numbers to
Oh yeah, I don't have those
scores.
at RPS.
Assign numbers to score? Assign scores to reviews, rather.
I can assign numbers to scores. That 70 looks like about a 70 to me.
We did have a thing, which was RPS recommends, where we would, if we remembered, we would stick, an RPS recommends sticker onto the header image of a thing, and that would mean that we really liked it and thought you might really like it as well. But that was also really arbitrary. It was essentially this is good, but better than other things in some way.
That's an awkward one to, if you have a scoring system, then there's no ambiguity. But if you have an award you give for things you like, but then you don't always give it, even if you do like the thing, then those people have to assume I guess they didn't think it was recommended.
It's weird though, isn't it? Because it's essentially if you're on RPS, you presumably know that things get done when they are remembered and not a moment sooner.
Yeah.
Shall we do some questions?
Yes. Frog writes. I don't know how to say that. Dear Ink Stamp and Bottle Bar, a few years ago I realised I lived just close enough to London that I could go there to see a gig after work and just catch the last train home. My slightly obscure music tastes have led me to a few small venues where I've seen some of my favourite bands play to small passionate crowds. It's a euphoric feeling, suddenly being in a room full of people who love the thing that you do, when up until that point I'd never met anyone who did. How do you think I could get this feeling for the games I love? What is the gaming equivalent of a gig? Thanks all for a great pod, and extra thanks to Tom and Chris for the Bloodborne videos. Well, they're not here, so thanks denied.
Wow, that's brutal. But we will accept those thanks. Esports, they are amazing for exactly that. I mean, obviously, if the game that you happen to be super into is the opposite end of that spectrum, then that's maybe a problem. But I would say definitely if you are into the competitive multiplayer PvP type stuff, or even if you're not, I think it's really lovely going along to esports things. Like a couple of my friends who work on One Life Left went along to I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been maybe a Counter-Strike thing. I can't remember. But they went along to an esports event, having that not be their area of expertise, and it's an amazing environment to be in, and you get caught up in the emotion of the thing and the humanity of the just the interactions. It's people who want to do well at a thing trying to do the best of the people up on stage, and it's this really lovely thing. And also as somebody who plays League of Legends and Dota and things, the only other people that I know who play League are actually other games journalists, and even then we don't really play together. And so going to those events was really eye-opening, because obviously it's like this massive game and it's got such a huge player base, but none of those people are people I know in real life, really. And so it was just really nice going along and everybody being on the same page suddenly, and not needing to explain, oh, well, that's this hero or champion rather, and like they do this, and that's why we're excited about this thing. Like everyone was just actually like in the moment and excited about the things. So that was really lovely.
Yeah, I think that's a better answer than what I was going to say.
Oh no.
My first thought was just like talks by game developers. If I'm a big enough fan of a game, then that's a thing that it does not have the energy of a gig at all. It's just a live thing that you do that where a lot of the people in that room with you will be people who are also really interested in that game. And yeah, it basically just kind of reminded me of GDC. Like for me, GDC is that, and that's not just the talks, but also parties and stuff, where just like for that 1 week there's an incredible concentration of all the people around the world who share my interests, and they're all in one place for once, and it's amazing. It's like living in this weird fantasy land where everybody likes the same things you do.
I think there's a critical mass with GDC, and you get it a little bit at things like EGX or at Rezzed or whatever, because there are panels and there are, dev talks and things like that. But so if you can get along to stuff like that, or if you can get along to LAN events like the Insomnia LANs, things like that might be cool. Jake Tucker runs Video Brains in London, which is like, it's in a pub in North London, or at least it was last time I was able to go and check in with it. And that's just a bunch of interesting people doing talks about things. I gave one about Dota and fashion, and how like living games are kind of have almost like a fashion industry type cycle to them in some ways. And that's just quite a nice space, because I know a bunch of people who went along to those who weren't actually, in the industry, but just wanted to be with similar people who were interested in that side of things. So that was really cool. I'm trying to think, there was something else, but...
For StarCraft, there's barcrafts.
Yeah, they're
which is
called
where a bar shows.
pub stomps in Dota.
Okay, I was going to ask actually if there's a Dota equivalent. I guess there would be. Yeah. So that's quite, because like actually sports events are, I suppose these days there are a lot of regional ones.
Yeah.
But, in a more like a thing to go to after work, I imagine, a bar craft or pub stomp would be more.
I think certainly when a big event, like for example the international for Dota rolls around, they usually list out a bunch of, viewing parties that they know about on the website. There's options for you to search, stuff like that. And I think League of Legends has like a similar thing. I think, people have viewing parties or whatever. So that is stuff that you can keep an eye on, I guess. So, yeah. And awesome games done quick, stuff like that is cool. Like, so sort of Twitch streamed stuff that gets a bit of a community mentality behind it. I remember as well, it's not gaming, but the Bob Ross stream the first time around, that was amazing. It was just this really lovely thing and kind of ridiculous because it overlaid Twitch chat ridiculousness over Bob Ross, which is just awesome.
Let me just check something about this next question. What I've done is I pasted in the questions and I pasted in the actual name of the person who sent it to us, but I didn't paste in what they actually signed the email off as. And in cases where someone might not have signed it with the same name as what they said in the title, I don't want to read the wrong name. Okay. James writes, not a question, but just a quick heads up that the finest example of a busman's holiday is Tom Francis taking a break from developing Heat Signature and creating Morphblade. And then he says some nice things about Morphblade, which I won't repeat. Busman's holiday was a phrase another question I mentioned, and I didn't know what it was. And it's funny that I
you did one.
Yep, I had a busman's holiday. That sounds pretty fair assessment. And then this question is actually from Frog again, but it's a good one. When I check out someone's profile on Steam, I always look at the games they own and sort them by playtime so I can get 100% totally reliable insight into who they are as a person. Given that everyone does the same, for which games would you like to swap the playtime shown to a potential onlooker? Personally, I would move the 283 hours I have on Football Manager 2011 and 2012 and share it between a few games, including Her Story, To the Moon, and Tacoma, that deserve to be much higher on my list. Keep up the fine podding and the excellent Bloodborne vids. So we brought up each other's profiles.
I must say, I have never done this for anyone else. I've done it for myself once to answer a question on the RPS podcast, I think. Adam was asking, so I knew what my top 3 were. But you didn't.
No. Yeah, I can ask you questions about this. Good. Okay, so, would you be surprised to learn that your most played game is one called Dota 2, I think?
Oh, no, I must have just left that running.
And after that, Adventure Capitalist. Which
yeah.
I've heard of a lot, but actually I don't know anything about it. I thought it was a mobile game.
Okay, so Adventure Capitalist is actually a clicker game, but because I went through a phase of being obsessed by it, so what you do is you start off by clicking on a thing to generate, obviously the revenue from producing that thing or fulfilling that task or whatever. But then as you accumulate a bit of money, you get to automate that to a certain degree, and then the next thing opens up and blah, blah, blah. And it got to the point where I was making a ridiculous amount of money, but I was so into keeping the ball rolling that I wanted to keep it open so that every time a new upgrade was available, I would be able to be there to make that happen. And so what that ended up being is that isn't really playtime. It's more that I had it running in the background and would check in on it when I was between news stories or something.
Yeah, so I actually do that a lot, and so a lot of my playtimes are wrong, but for XCOM, I don't think I did do that much because XCOM just puts my graphics card on max. It's just absolutely like full burn.
Oh, wow.
And so I don't think I would have left that running in the background a lot. So it's 175 hours, probably real.
Well, so firstly, it's 181 hours. Actually, I think
that's
you'll
today.
find. But also, would it surprise you to know that that is your fourth most played thing on Steam?
I haven't looked at this list in a long time, so what I remember is that Supreme Commander 2 is really high up.
That's fifth.
Despite not being that fresh in my memory. Like, I remember playing it at lunchtime every day for a long time, but I didn't really think of it as nothing like as big as Supreme Commander 1 for me. Okay, so number 1 is Game Maker, right?
Yeah. Although, upsettingly, in the time that apparently it has taken you to make, 2 games, I have, I could basically, I've got 2,000 hours or something in Dota, right? You've got 5,000 hours in Game Maker. I could have done something with my life.
One of the biggest games. So to reassure you, I actually, maybe a year ago switched from using Game Maker on Steam to using it off Steam. So,
okay.
At least 1,000 hours would not be on there.
Thank goodness for that. But yeah, so there's 2 games between that and XCOM 2.
Okay. So way back in the day, Team Fortress 2 was a big deal, but I think I only have like 200 hours in that, and Skyrim must be at least 200. So Spelunky might be up there. I want to say Skyrim for number 2.
Skyrim's even further down.
Oh my god.
You've got 313 hours in this one, if that rings any bells. If there's something in your internal clock that kicks off
No,
at
you're
that.
gonna have to remind me.
Metal Gear Solid 5.
Oh, right. Oh, that's another interesting one, because I played that all in one, not in one session, but in one burst. Like, I just, something like Game Maker and Spelunky and Skyrim and all those others, things I dipped in and out of over the course of like 5-10 years, whereas Metal Gear Solid, I started playing it, and then when I stopped playing it, I stopped playing it forever.
Spelunky doesn't even make your top 10.
Really? Mm-hmm. Wow.
So it goes Game Maker, MGS 5, Team Fortress 2, XCOM 2, Supreme Commander 2. You like your 2s. Invisible Ink, Skyrim.
I'm glad that's higher.
Fallout
that's actually,
4.
That was going to be my answer to the question, is to put Invisible Ink higher, but actually it's pretty high.
Fallout 4, Far Cry Primal, and XCOM Enemy Unknown. You've also got more than 100 hours on Dishonored 2 and Big Pharma.
Oh god. Okay, Dishonored 2, I think I did leave that in the background quite a lot. That was an alt-tabby game.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so any of those you'd switch out?
Oh yeah, so I guess yes, Spelunky should be way higher. It should be.
You might just want to leave that on for a while, just to keep the result.
I mean, I played that before it was on Steam for at least 1,000 lives, and then when the version that is now on Steam came out first on Xbox, I played it for about 1,000 lives there, and then. But that said, Daily Challenge was only on the PC Steam version, and I played that a hell of a lot. So I am surprised it's not higher.
Thing is, I played the Daily Challenge quite a lot, but the fact that I didn't survive more than a minute on most of those playthroughs.
My runs also did not last more than half an hour each. Okay, so you're 3 and 4. Mm-hmm. Do you want to take any guesses?
I know that No Man's Sky is on there. Mm-hmm. Is that 3?
I'll tell you 3 and 4.
Subnautica is maybe on there.
Subnautica and No Man's Sky are 3 and 4, but in which order? It's close, I'll tell you that.
I feel like No Man's Sky is possibly higher.
Yep, right. 76 in that, 71 in Subnautica.
Oh, wow.
And then your next most played game? This is a surprise to me.
Oh, God. What else do I play? It feels like I'm drawing a blank.
To some extent, this is very biased towards games that just take a long time to play, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, I love Metal Gear Solid 5, but it's not in my top 5 games. It just took a long time to play.
Yeah, like, what is it? I'm completely...
Counter-Strike Go.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's peer pressure. That's just peer pressure. I watch a lot more Counter-Strike Go than I do play it. Like,
Right.
I'm no good at it.
Do you watch it like in the client?
No, this is entirely because it was a good way to keep up with some friends. So we would just like, essentially we would put on a Jason Derulo playlist and play gun game for like 4 hours a night. And so like, it wasn't a case of actually playing Counter-Strike. It was more having it as like a thing that you could do in the background of chatting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah. I bet everything else is quite low in terms of playtime.
Yeah, so that was 56, Counter-Strike. And then there's one that's very close to that. Any guesses?
Is it another PvP thing?
No.
Huh.
Single player. We've talked about it not that long ago.
Rogue Islands?
Nope. Long Dark.
Oh, okay, that'll be that fucking bear.
54 hours against the bear.
Take down that bear! I finally did it in the end, by the way. Got no shoes left except for the one pair that I now carefully take off every time I have to fight something.
And then it's Slime Rancher, and then after that, what was your next favourite game after all of those?
Is it just something dreadful and shameful?
The one you love so much. Can't stop talking about how much you love this game.
God. Oh, so I'm clearly scathing about it. Which games do I not like? I mean, Hearthstone is really annoying, but that's on Battle.net, so you'll get hide nor hair of that on this chart. No, what have I got?
Battleborn.
Ooh, that was that review! Do you know what though? It's possibly been pushed up significantly by the fact that I tried to play it fairly recently for a couple of the updates that they said had changed it significantly, and I queued for ages to try and find games. Like, it had queue times of like approaching 20 minutes for a single match, and like just trying to grind up through levels to get to like a particular level cap was punishing.
That was a fun game.
I don't know what I'd change. I mean, obviously the Battleborn thing is possibly not representative of my opinions.
Yeah, switch that with something.
About games. But obviously, like, it shows that I gave that game more than a fair crack of the whip, right? I paid my dues. Probably a venture capitalist as well, but it's one of those weird things where like someone would look at that list and maybe think, oh, I know what you do with your time, and it's like, actually, no, because you don't know that I was watching Holby City while I was playing a venture capitalist.
Yeah, it's biased towards games that take a long time. It's biased towards games that you can all tab out from safely.
Yeah. Because the other thing is, if I plonked all of those hours into like a tiny indie game that I thought made me look better to random people on Steam, then they might just look at that and go, why did it take her 45 hours to complete the easiest game in the universe? What was she doing?
Yeah. Sam writes...
I wonder what Chris's are. I'm going to look those up.
Yeah, but maybe on the next pod we should... as
we
long
should
as
go
they
back to this.
Yeah, as long as they don't look theirs up in the meantime.
Yeah.
We should grill them on it. Chris and Tom. Sam writes, Dear Coretta Fox and Chance Vega, and as soon as I read this I knew those are heat signature names. I've never had those heat signature names, but I can tell they're heat signature names. Now that Heatsink is released, I'd like to thank you for the many development vlogs you made throughout the project. As a game dev myself, I found them very interesting and something that game devs and studios rarely seem to show, day-to-day design decisions and considerations. My question is, which game mechanic would you most like to watch a devlog for? Preferably by the designer of the feature, who is wearing a t-shirt and jeans whilst recording in their kitchen. Best of luck with whatsoever's next. Sam. Yeah, I was thinking about this today because, like I said, I was watching that interview with Jake Solomon about XCOM, and having come off playing XCOM and being quite frustrated with the Geoscape, he actually says that he shows an early version of the Geoscape, which is based on the board game Pandemic, and he's showing it in the context of like, oh god, look at how awful this is, thank god we ditched that. And I'm looking at it thinking, I'd like that. That's cool. And he said, like, it wasn't working. I don't know why it wasn't working. I'm sure there's legit reasons. But he says the way he solved that problem was to go into Sid Meier's office and sit down with him and say, like, how can we get this to work? And they figured out something together, and they made a paper prototype of it and played that, physically, and figured it out that way. But I don't like it. And so I would like to see a devlog about what that process was like, or why.
Yeah.
In particular, my perception of it, and maybe this is not the intent, but to me it's like there's a whole load of things dotted around the globe, and you fly to them, and each one takes time, and like it's all scanning for some reason. You achieve everything by scanning, including picking up your monthly pay. And that takes time, and then everything else has to interrupt that. Like all the other events and things that can happen in the game interrupt you scanning things. So you start scanning something, sometimes as soon as you get there, it's just like immediately, pop-up screen, no, you gotta do this now, and you go off and do a tactical mission. And for me, like one of my objectives with the strategic mode, for a game that has like a strategic mode and a tactical mode, one of the objectives for the strategic mode would be like, don't make the other mode feel like a pain in the ass. Like, just get out of its way and make that feel like a cool thing. Like, I would always want the tactical mode to be a bonus. Like, oh, cool, I get to do this. But instead it's like, you're trying to do this in the video escape, and it's like, no, you can't do that, you gotta do this first. And you're like, but I was right in the middle of that. Like, the key consideration for me would be like, don't make it interrupt the other mode, make it, you finish that, and then at the end of that we trigger the next mission or whatever. And then, like, give me a tactical mission when I want to break from the strategic thing, rather than when I'm starting to get interested in it. So there must have been a reason they did it that way. It's obviously a very intentional thing, and I'd like to know why they wanted it that way.
Yeah. I think, so I now have 3 points that I'm trying to juggle in my head with the amount of gin and tonic that we've had. So this could be interesting, and it might end up just being 1 point when I forget the others. But, so the first and obviously the most important thing is that in the context of you just talking about him then and him having an actual office, I have now had to remember that Sid Meier is not a pirate. Like, in my head, Sid Meier's pirates. Like, I think I truncated that to Sid Meier's is pirates. And it's just like, do you know what? Sure.
It's a possessive apostrophe.
I think in my head I've just been like, sure, that man's a pirate. And he is pirating at sea. It's fine.
So Dick Solomon rowed his boat over to Sid Meier's main ship, and then he got into the captain's cabin, and they made a board game prototype together.
Exactly. Like, what is wrong with that? But then you're all like, oh, he's got an office. And I'm going, wait, what? Anyway, so that was point 1. Point 2.
Is he also Gettysburg?
No, because I haven't played that. So I'm fine with just the pirate. So the second point is that there was actually a really interesting Twitter thread recently, and I cannot for the life of me remember the right name, so I'm just going to assume that we will look it up and post a link when we put the show notes up. But it was someone essentially getting into the problems of talking openly about game development decisions online, and how contentious it is, and how
Charles Randall, I think.
Yes, and how you're essentially just opening yourself up to abuse, or, like, it's such a polarized landscape and so toxic that actually being able to talk about anything, like, even beyond just marketing and NDA restrictions, you just end up not wanting to, because of how awful it can suddenly be, or how, it's like, it's not a forgiving space in which to speak.
Yeah, people misinterpret and they bring their own assumptions to it, and any decision you can make can be seen negatively. I've been really lucky with this. I do these dev vlogs, and I feel like I do them in this private corner of the internet where there's, a few hundred people who follow me and who just like them, and they've just sort of signed up for it. Like, they want this specific thing and they're on board with it. And so the reaction I get is always uniformly positive, and no one does call me out on things. I'm sure I've said, for one thing, I'm sure I've talked about loads of features in those devlogs that are not in his signature. And so if I was the representative of a game as big as, XCOM, for example, talking about that stuff before release and then not having it in the final game would be a huge controversy, and people would be furious at me for it. And I just have this very privileged position where I'm small enough that I don't get that much attention. I don't get that kind of attention where people, like, there's an angry mob looking for any mistakes in anything I do. But my audience is big enough that I do get responses to devlogs. I'm not shouting into the void. People do respond to them, and I get a nice response. I guess I should be worried about ever getting any bigger. You know, like the size I'm at is just right for this. But also, I am 95% sure that if I was a woman, I would not get this level of positivity. There would just be like, I'm sure all of the people who are nice to me now would still be nice to me, but I just get a whole bunch of like extra people who would show up to decide that I'm wrong about X and I'm an idiot and unqualified and all this stuff, other stuff.
Or the phrasings of how people speak to you are different. Like, do you remember it ended up going viral, so probably everyone has seen it, but the thing where the guy, there was a man and a woman who worked at the same firm and they just traded their signatures on emails, and the guy, as soon as he started using his female colleague's name, like there was a significant uptick in being patronising and being talked over and having to make the same point again and again, having to sort of, I think, faux CC in like the dude to get like, you know, it was an interesting one. So maybe like, we should probably link to that as well, just in case it's an interesting thing. I mean, obviously it's one person's thing, but it chimes with so much of anyone's experience on the internet, or rather mine, in some very specific ways. The other thing that I was going to say, the third point before it slithers away into the bubbling ether, is, the fact that these things that come into my head, I'm in the privileged position of being one of the people that gets to ask those questions. And so if I'm wondering what was behind a specific decision, or why the artwork looks a certain way, or why this and not that, or do you think that this impacted your sales, or, you know, any number of those questions, I can fold it into an interview and actually send it to the dev, or like say, hey, I'm at GDC this year, do you have a moment to chat about, you know, these things? And because chances are, if one person is wondering, and certainly, especially if the game is big enough, like that's probably other people are wondering the same thing. Or if you're the only person that plays those games, like it's an open ground in which to sort of actually dig into it and find out what's interesting and be the only person that is asking those questions. So yeah, like I kind of, in those ways, I don't want them to start making those dev videos because it means like, oh,
it's valuable content.
What do I do?
On the subject of this sort of devs exposing their process causing backlash, I got like the tiniest little glimpse of that recently and it was such an extreme example where the thing I was posting was just like, I had been working on a little UI element that was just going to tell you how many defector missions you have left that you haven't completed yet in heat signature, and I wrote it as like 3 defector missions remaining, and then I realized, when there's 1 defector missions remaining, it can't say missions anymore, it has to say mission singular. And that's just like 3 lines of code you don't really want to write because it just complicates things. It's not hard to write, it's just makes the code less wieldy overall. And I realized if I phrased it as defector missions, 3, then even when it's 1, it's okay to have the plural. It just grammatically that reads okay.
Missions remaining 0.
Yeah, and if you can, like, if you've got a lot of those, that could save you a lot of lines of code. So I tweeted that, and a lot of people were, enjoyed that and retweeted it and stuff. And then eventually I got somebody saying like, I think the dev should just do whatever is best for the user and not consider their own, their own time. And I don't think that person is a developer because you just know that everything that's ever made is a compromise. Everything that's ever made is we have this much time to make this thing.
Yeah.
We need to optimize what we can make in that time. And part of that is deciding which of these things are not that important to the end user. And this is a usability thing. Like, it is a positive usability thing to not bother with things that aren't actually a problem. Like, because you get to spend that time on other stuff that does matter, and you get to make, more important decisions and fix more important problems and make the overall experience better. That was like, like I say, I'm incredibly protected from this stuff. And that was one tiny case where somebody did, sort of go at me for sharing a tip that was just so innocuous. It was just so clear. Oh, for fuck's sake. Do you really think anyone is gaining anything from me saying defect to mission 1?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because one of the things that I was thinking while I was reading the Charles Randall thread was about, like, how it's interesting how differently other people perceive the work that is being done, or the effort that is going in, or what they are entitled to as a recipient of that product, and sort of the toxic culture that leads into, and things like, you know, people going, well, obviously it would be really easy to just add multiplayer, or, you know, I think that was one of the examples given. But there are obviously also, you know, just very real trade-offs. But also, when I'm writing things, I don't always know, you know, like, you just can't predict how someone's going to take something. And I remember I wrote something fairly recently about, because I just found the interview that Jeff Kaplan put up, the dev blog rather, about how, sure, Overwatch's development team could and should do things to help combat toxic behaviour and abuse in their game. But also the onus is, you know, there is culpability on behalf of the player base to, i.e. not, you know, be awful to each other to start with. You know, it's not coming solely from the game. It's that people are choosing to reach out to the chat box and type awful things at each other. And so sort of asking people to be cognizant of that when they go to do things or when they're playing the game, because obviously if you keep on having to firefight, it does take up resources that maybe could be spent elsewhere. And it was just so interesting watching the comments that all just completely seemed to miss the point of that. And it was like, okay, well, I don't know if that's like a self-selecting thing, whether, you know, the people who were galvanized to comment are maybe less likely to see that point of view. I mean, you know, not being, you know, not wanting to generalize to internet commenters at all, but it's kind of like, it was an interesting, okay, what does this even, you know, like, are there people who are reading the story and getting what I was getting at with it? Or is this all just, is that how everyone then listens and takes this stuff? Like, you start wondering if you're going mad and you're just hearing things a certain way and the entire rest of the world seems to just be like, oh no, we got to a completely different place with this. And I wonder whether game developers must have that, like, so extremely when you're kind of like, I made this change because I thought it would be really nice for everybody. Yeah. And then you suddenly get, like, you know, like, David, what's his name, who made the change in, one of the changes in, was it Call of Duty to the sniper, like, rate of fire, or it was something, like, I can't remember the details, and then just got death threats for weeks, and you're kind of like, I mean.
Did you see somebody, I think it might be a Reddit post, in response to the Kaplan, devlog about Overwatch, said that, they sort of, like, recognized their own behavior in the things he was talking about and said, like, all right, I'll just try it. I'll try being nice for a while. And instead of bitching about people choosing Hanzo or whatever, they'd sort of, like, compliment people on their good plays and stuff. And so nothing happened at first, and then, like, after a while of doing this, they started to find that people were nice back to them and that they just had a really good time and the game was great. Wow, you discovered kindness.
Oh my god, yeah, because I saw that when it ended up as, like, a screen grabbed and retweeted thing on Twitter, obviously, because I try not to poke the hornet's nest of Reddits too often. Like, sometimes they have amazing stuff, or just, like, people, like, really geeking out about, I don't know, like, obscure lore and stuff. That's one of the best things about it. But then sometimes you just find, whoa, okay, just shut it all down. But nope, not having this. So yeah.
The best thing about Reddit is the thread recently that was on Ask Reddit of, like, what are you going to play this weekend? And Heat Signature was the top response, and it got, like, 8,000 upvotes or something. And it was, like, amazingly high profile, except, like, there was no sort of link or anything. There was, like, it just says Heat Signature, and then someone else, like, Someone else gave it quite a good tagline, which is like, oh, it's like Hotline Miami in space or something, and lots of people like that. But I still don't know, did that get me anything? Did anybody, like, you know, Google it? You do actually get, like, store page analytics. You can see where hits came from, and it's strangely hard to really understand it. It looks like almost all the hits come from basically people searching for it. Like, some are from Google, but most are from people searching for it in Steam.
Yeah.
And that really just raises further questions. It's like, why were they searching for it in Steam? Where did they come from? How do they know about it?
I mean, I suppose
maybe they all came from Reddit.
I wonder if, because obviously that's a problem, or not a problem, but it's like it makes the paper trail a bit harder because, I mean, I know that if I'm looking for something and it takes me to the Steam page for a thing, like in my browser, I'm not logged in usually, and I'm just like, oh, for God's sake, I'll just look for it on Steam. So then you would lose any context that might have come from the actual hit, and it would just be, she typed it into the search bar in Steam.
Yeah, I think there's, like, sort of marketing and acquisition folks have a term for this, and it might be something like last contact or something. There's sort of like, it's a name for the bias that a lot of these stats have, where they say like, oh, 90% of our purchases came to it through the web, but actually, you know, most of those people actually saw ads on mobile that they didn't click on because they don't want to fucking do it on their phone.
Yeah.
But that's why they looked for it later on their desktop or whatever. Yeah. I don't know what the actual relationships are like, but that's a known bias.
That's interesting. I've kind of forgotten what the question was or whether we've answered it. I'm going to assume yes.
What do you want to see a devlog for? Well, yeah, I feel like.
Sure. It's complicated.
James writes, Dear Macro8 and Microbars, podcast voice. Games are an excellent way to relieve stress, use as escapism or as a coping mechanism. I suffer from panic disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and paranoia. As such, this makes life, the social interactions, and many other activities that come with it extremely stressful and exhausting. Because of my busy lifestyle, working 7 days a week and helping raise a young son when I'm not at work, I don't have much time for games, a few hours a week most of the time. I currently play My Summer Car, a peaceful game about building a car in the Finnish countryside. I'm always dipping into Minecraft and Terraria and other games in that vein. I pick these games because they don't require anything from me when I'm not playing them, making me anxious that I should be playing them. And they are low mental engagement when I am playing, and they have elements to them that let me scratch my OCD itch, i.e. uniform grid-based building, inventory, item management, and so on. My question is twofold. Do you have any suggestions for games that are easy to engage and disengage with, and have games help you through mental illness or difficult times in life? Thanks, and keep up the great pod. James. So the second question I think we've answered before.
In many ways, I think. So, like, maybe one day we should create, like, a list of, if you want to know about these specific things, we talk about them on these pods. We should possibly be better at tagging. Mayhap. But I think I was kind of interested to read this out partly because I think that it's nice to hear that those specific games were good.
Yeah, I was interested to know that.
Because My Summer Car is one that I was actually looking at today for some reason and then ended up
Isn't
not
that
playing.
one sort of crazy hard? Isn't it the one that gives you no instructions at all and you just have to build a car from scratch?
I think it's something like that. Like, as in, it seems to be like the hardcore thing. And maybe something like, actually, Car Mechanic Simulator, if they've fixed the teething troubles that seem to be having at launch, that might be another. I think a lot of simulators might be good if you're in that headspace. So, for example, Euro Truck Simulator is perhaps a good. I mean, obviously, the time sink might be the problem given life requirements, but that might be a good one for just sort of trying out and seeing whether that's a good chill out zone for you of an evening. Yeah,
it's pretty basic, but my sort of go-to game for quickly dipping into with no pressure is Shenzhen Solitaire, which is a spin-off of Shenzhen.io. They made a solitaire game. I think it's a lot like Free Cell, but I haven't actually played Free Cell, so I don't really know. But it's just sort of card solitaire-ish game, where 95% of the time it's possible to solve it, and about 60% of the time you'll figure that out
Yeah.
and know how to solve it. But it is just like, it's a nice little puzzle to solve, and it's very satisfying when you do it, and you usually can do it.
Depending on whether these kinds of games make you anxious or sort of end up as sort of unhealthily repetitive, I really like what's it called, Regency Solitaire. So that's a good, it's a sort of Jane Austen romance-esque solitaire game, which I really like, from Grey Alien Games. And there's also, if you're more in the mood for pottering, I would recommend Subnautica and No Man's Sky. I mean, obviously I've got enough hours in them that I can vouch for their pottering. And you can also just play them as wandering stuff.
They've
rather
both got
than
like sort of tourist modes.
Yeah, like
or
there's
equivalents.
like I think I think it might be called creative mode on both of them, but like definitely on Subnautica it's possible to remove pretty much all of the, like the food requirements and stuff, so you're not sort of in full survival mode. And similarly on No Man's Sky there's a few different options for how challenging you want the experience to be and how much you just want to wander around. So yeah, and they're very pretty, both of them.
Yeah. Okay, that's all the questions we have time for. You can send us questions at questions@crateandcrowbar.com or tweet them at us at crateandcrowbar on Twitter. You can follow us individually. I am at Pentadact, Pentadact. Pip.
So, this reminds me. Chris said that there was a question about me using double letters when I spell out my name. Like, I think this was maybe a week or so ago. He only mentioned it in passing, because I wasn't on that week. But so my Twitter name is at PHILIPPAWARR. And I think the question was, why do you say double R but not double P? On the and I think I would need to like sit down and actually properly think about this, but I think it's because of the way that you go PHILIPPA, but then the W introduces the concept of the double into my head, and also because RR is a harder thing to say than like a plosive.
Yeah.
Like, you have to actually make the effort to delineate. And so, because I think I have just a lazy mouth, I would say, double R is an easier thing to say than RR.
Unless you're Sid Meier.
Yes. And he's a pirate.
In which case it's second nature to him.
But, so what does he do on the 19th of September? Does he just talk like a non-pirate day for him?
Like a game designer day.
Yes, and he just like wanders around going, well, yes, and having proper business conversations. Everyone has to meet him on that one day.
So talk like a pirate day, like talking like a pirate is a sort of binary operation that cycles back to zero if you try and add
it's only a novelty if you're not a pirate, right? If you're a pirate, you're like, oh, I need a change.
Like when you have text in italics and then within the text there's something that should be in italics, so you actually put it back to non-italics.
Yeah, or when you drag to highlight a piece of text, and so if one thing was like in the inverse, then suddenly...
Just like all those things.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we have a Discord room. Our Discord channel actually has a... okay, so what is it? A Discord server has rooms within it, right? And then I just discovered today that there's a room called Tom's Game, and I clicked on that and what is that? Turns out it's about his signature. And it's been going for like a while. Well, I mean, I say a while, a day, I think. I thought it had just been created because it was mentioned in there, and I thought, oh, maybe they're mentioning me to tell me this exists, but actually, no, it's been going already. Which is cool.
But now you know and it's ruined, they'll have to find a new way.
I haven't been, so there's been a lot of just like, talk about his signature on the Discord, and I have not participated that much. Jumped in like once to sort of clarify a factual thing. But for the most part, like a lot of people have a lot of questions about like, oh, how does this work? Or what is this rule? Or I think this isn't in there, or, when really it is. And I haven't spent time going in and sort of clarifying all that stuff because there's just too much of it. It's just coming from all angles all the time forever. And to some extent there's like, this game has taught me to prioritize heavily. There are just 1,000 things to know about it. And so if the thing you don't understand is causing you to be unable to play the game or something, then I'll probably help you out. But if it's just like, I'm curious about this, you probably won't respond because there's just so much to do at the moment.
Also, the community is actually really nice. So, I think if it's a thing that someone else has encountered, it's only a matter of time before someone steps in and helps you out.
Yeah.
Because our Discord is lovely.
Yep.
You can find it via the webpage, I believe. We should probably set up a helpful shortened link for this nonsense.
Not done that yet.
But at the moment, just go to crateandcrowbar.com and then click on whatever the link is.
And that is our general website. There's also our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/crateandcrowbar. Our Patreon, which allows you to generously fund us, is patreon.com/crateandcrowbar. That might be it. We don't have like a Facebook page. And nor should we, because Facebook are terrible and they hold your user base to ransom. That's why Suspicious Relevance still does have a Facebook page, but I don't use it ever because they did this thing where like people who've signed up to see all your posts no longer see all your posts unless you pay to send them your posts. Bullshit.
And when we've joined other social medias, for example Pinterest,
I'm delaying because I feel like there's one other and I'm hoping it's going to occur to me, but it hasn't.
So hang on. We've done YouTube, we've done Twitter, we've done the fact that we don't have Facebook.
I have our website in front of us.
We've done Discord, we've done the website. I don't think we have any other things. They can send the questions to questions. They can, I think we're done. I think we're done here.
All right. In that case,
thanks for
listening, everybody.